Greta's summer break is over. She tried to sail to Gaza on the Freedom Flotilla, or given the attitudes of some of the people on board, maybe we should call it Flotilla The Hun. A bunch of vegan gender goblins tried to do what Hamas and Hezbollah couldn't and defeat Israel. It didn't work. Israel dropped a white irritant on the boat, which was unnecessary as it already contained a white irritant in the form of Greta Thunberg, and then stormed it, and she's still moaning about being kidnapped.
People were not being treated well. I was not able to say goodbye to people, and I don't know what's happening. And there were many issues.
To be fair, it wasn't any less effective an attack on Israel than the entire Iranian military managed. Greta took a symbolic amount of aid to relieve victims of the genocide in Gaza. If you're worried that symbolic aid might not be as good as actual aid, don't worry, the genocide is also symbolic. It doesn't exist either, and the hard work of delivering millions of meals to Gaza is being done by the Israeli government, who ironically have a bit less to hand out now they have to feed Greta as well. Look at that, the first time I've seen her smile is when an Israeli slips her some sausage. Oh, I'm supposed to be vegan actually. Greta was sent back to Sweden. Israel managed to do something that no European country can do and actually deport someone who's entered illegally on a small boat. The whole thing was a farce. When she saw the cameras, she even did the AOC trick of putting her hands behind her back to pretend to be handcuffed. Everyone is making fun of her and nobody is talking about the climate. How did she go from climate messiah to pariah? For a while she could do no wrong. Millions of kids joined her school strikes. She won awards. She spoke at conferences. People even put up statues to her that look a bit like C3PO. She was so popular, but now the Thunberg has hit an iceberg. Yeah, there are still some in the sea. Effigies were burnt, the statues were torn down, climate buddies fell out with her, and no wonder. She seems more interested in getting attention than getting people to reduce emissions. Instead of persuading Andrew Tate to live a low carbon lifestyle and swap his Bugatti for a bicycle, she said he had a small pee-pee. Wow, great work, Greta. She supports mass immigration. Her boat even picked up 4 Libyan refugees. But when someone moves from the third world to the UK, their carbon footprint climbs astronomically. Mass immigration has increased the UK's carbon emissions by 25 million tonnes just since Greta started nagging us. She supports transgender ideology, even though transgender ideology has got nothing to do with climate change. If anything, trans people are responsible for more plastic going into the environment. She's aligned herself with Hamas. Maybe she's impressed by their carbon neutral executions of homosexuals. But these are all divisive issues that have alienated people who otherwise might support her. She doesn't seem to care about people either. Millions have died as a result of net zero pushing energy prices higher than the ozone layer. And the power and influence of the trillion-dollar green energy industry that platforms her is now very obvious. Were they just using her to push their money-making agenda? The issues Greta supports all seem to contradict each other, until you realise they're all centred around a desire to undermine nation states and destroy Western capitalist democracy so that Greta and her tea-towel wearing buddies and left-wing people can remake the West as a communist utopia. But all Greta is destroying is her own credibility. Let's dig into it, but first, have you ever wondered why random people know your phone number, address, political leanings, or that weird thing you bought online at 3 AM? This is the work of data brokers who go through your digital detritus like your mum went through your stuff when you were 14 and found your wank sock. These nosy companies vacuum up your personal details like addresses, social media info, court records, family details, even your embarrassing high school photos, and then sell it to anyone who'll pay. Marketers, scammers, vengeful ex-girlfriends, or the bloke from last week's road rage incident who wrote down your number plate, paid 20 quid for your home address, and is now hiding in your garden dressed like Rambo. You can stop all of this using Incogni. They scrub your personal data from the internet, and you can click here for 60% off. And you get robocalls from guys named Stephen who know way too much about you, pretending to be from your bank or telling you you've won a prize. That's data brokers at work too. When scammers have your data, it gives them the weapons they need to target you or your family. Identity theft, scams, stalking, the risks are massive, but manually tracking and removing your information from hundreds of these dodgy sites would take forever. There's good news. Incogni does it all automatically. It contacts the brokers, fights their objections, slaps them around the face a bit, and repeatedly removes your data, because data brokers are like weeds. They keep popping back up. And with Incogni's new custom custom removals tool, which is included in their most popular plan. You can request removal from any site, even those outside of their automated system, giving you maximum control over your digital footprint. You can take your personal data back. Use the code KEARS at the link below for 60% off an annual plan and stop being a sitting duck for scammers, marketers and creepy road ragers. Click now at incogni.com/Kearse. That's Kearse. Now back to Greta. She was diagnosed with Asperger's, autism, OCD and depression. That's a full house if you're playing self-obsessed Western teenager bingo, as well as selective mutism, which could be a bit more selective if you ask me. Apparently selective mutism means she only speaks when necessary. Yeah, everyone just speaks when necessary. We're not just walking around saying random words. Well, they seem to have cured it. Despite this smorgasbord of mental delights, in 2019 the climate change lobby thought that a neurodivergent child could do what scientists can't and convince us that climate change is really bad. If climate change is so important, why am I hearing about it from a kid with mental health problems instead of an expert? People say that, oh, as a child she has incredible emotional impact and symbolism. Yeah, but climate change is a serious complex subject, isn't it? So surely we should have the absolute top experts on it. If you were on a plane and a voice came over the tannoy saying, I know there's some wind shear and visibility is really bad, but we're going to let a 15-year-old girl land the plane. She doesn't know how to do it, but think of the emotional impact and symbolism she'll have as she tries to. Oh, and by the way, also she's got a variety of mental health problems. It wouldn't be the emotional impact I'd be worried about. It'd be the impact on the ground.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
How dare I? How dare you? I'm from Scotland. If temperatures rise 1 degree, I'll just have to undo the top button on my duffel coat. I mean, look at these plonkers trying to get British people to worry about warm weather. And imagine being a climate scientist. You've spent decades dedicating your life to putting in the hard yards, researching, modelling the climate and publishing papers, and then a neurodivergent teenage girl comes along and steals your thunder. They must feel how comedians like me feel watching Live at the Apollo. Still, she got headlines. Greta put climate change on the front pages. To protest climate issues, she got school kids around the world to stage walkouts at their own schools, and millions joined in. This was taken as proof that kids are right on board with the climate message. Now, I'm not saying that kids weren't totally sincere, but it might just mean that kids like having Fridays off school to go and play Candy Crush and sniff glue. It's like toddlers protesting by eating ice cream. Maybe if the kids had to show their commitment to climate change by doing something difficult like maths homework instead of having the day off, then we'd see who was really committed to it. During COVID, Greta moved the strikes online, so kids had to fire up the computer, which burns lots of fossil fuel generated electricity. But hey, I guess you've got to burn carbon to save carbon or something. Greta, the world's first 80-year-old child, ramped up the nagging with her next notable speech.
This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah blah blah. Build back better, blah blah blah. Green economy, blah blah blah. Net zero by 2050, blah blah blah. Net zero, blah blah blah. Climate neutral, blah blah blah. Hope is not blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah. Truly the I have a dream of our time. Broadcaster and naturalist Sir David Attenborough told her,
That is, you have aroused the world.
Aroused? The BBC never changes. I think David Attenborough might have put Swedish schoolgirl into his search and got confused. Greta did draw attention to the science. She insists that the science for climate change is settled. Yeah, like it was for COVID and gender ideology. Look at the science. The final collapse of sea ice will happen in 2016. Snow is ending and snow is increasing. Birds are getting bigger and birds are getting smaller. Winters are getting warmer and winters are getting colder. It's causing migraines and strokes strokes and dementia, well, it's definitely giving me a headache. Everywhere is warming twice as fast as everywhere else. How is this even possible? Trust the experts, guys. It's incredible science these guys do. Maybe they use the same predictive models that said that Hillary would definitely win the election and Kamala would definitely win the election. This climate scientist even said he had to leave out findings and stick to the narrative to get his work published. But yeah, the science is settled apparently. As Greta herself said, a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. All humanity wiped out in 5 years? That sounds pretty serious. Unfortunately, she said it 7 years ago, so that bit of science she said was settled didn't turn out to be settled, but we can definitely trust the science she's saying is settled now to stay settled. The main effect of climate change seems to be to make 19 degrees look hotter than a McDonald's apple pie filling. I'm not saying the climate isn't changing, and I'm not saying mankind doesn't have a role in it and it's not going to be bad, but the climate has always changed, and in fact right now we're at a remarkably low temperature for the Earth, and carbon levels were vastly higher, more than 10 times higher in prehistoric times. Not that I'm saying it would be good for that to happen. I mean, sea levels were 200 meters higher than they are now, and there were loads of dinosaurs, but I'm suspicious of the assumption that the answer to the current issues is communism. And also, I don't think us dragging our economies back to the Stone Age will even make any difference. Look at carbon emissions in China compared to the UK. We're an accounting error in the scheme of things. We could all go back to eating rocks and it would be offset by China opening one dildo factory. And Greta's alarmist approach came in for plenty of criticism, and no wonder. For as long as I can remember, I've been told that the world is about to end, there's going to be an ice age, or we're all going to burn, or an area of something the size of Wales every week, etc, etc. Even adults are terrified now, with birth strikers, women refusing to have kids until the weather is fixed. Yes, fugly, joyless liberals are removing they themselves from the gene pool, which is now warm enough to swim in all year round thanks to climate change. Ollie Valence Sheet slammed Greta for terrifying children.
I don't understand why you had this like demonic little gremlin high priestess of climatism as the goddess in classrooms, Greta.
Greta Thunberg, okay.
And the kids are all coming home with depression and anxiety. Why would you go to your music lesson or bother doing your homework or get out of bed if you think we're all going to be dead in 5 years anyway? I mean, they told me in class. Greta told me. Why would you bother? Doesn't give anybody hope.
And despite Greta's image as an authentic grassroots activist, the wheels have started to come off some of her PR stunts, such as when she tweeted a picture of herself sitting on the floor of a German train. This was revealed to be a staged photo opportunity when the train company hit back, tweeting, "Dear Greta, we were happy that you travelled with us on Saturday, but it would have been even nicer had you also reported how friendly and competently you were looked after by our team at your seat in the first class." Reminds me of Jeremy Corbyn, who pretended there were no seats in a train, forcing him to sit on the floor outside a toilet. A rare moment when Jeremy Corbyn's trousers smelled of other people's piss. CCTV released by the train company revealed that he'd walked past empty seats to find a place to be photographed suffering on the floor like a proper socialist. And Greta grabbed headlines with her spat with Andrew Tate. It was reported in The Guardian by one of their far-left activists masquerading as journalists. Former kickboxer, professional misogynist, and online entrepreneur Andrew Tate sent a boastfully hostile tweet to climate activist Greta Thunberg, 19, about his sports car collection. "Please provide your email address so I can send a complete list of my car collection and their respective enormous emissions," he wrote. He was probably hoping to enhance his status by mocking her climate commitment. Instead, she burned the macho guy to a crisp. In 9 words, she replied, "Yes, please do enlighten me. Email me at smalldickenergy@getalife.com. This response from Greta was applauded by leftists because body shaming is apparently good when they do it. While this might have got her glowing coverage in the left-wing press, surely she shouldn't be alienating Andrew Tate and his fans. If Greta is serious about carbon emissions, these are the guys she needs to get on board. Andrew Tate has a personal collection of 36 supercars, including a Bugatti Chiron per Sport, which gets 8 miles to the gallon. There's no point convincing a left-wing person not to buy a Bugatti, because they'll never be able able to afford one anyway. Left-wing people will get the bus because they're poor and they smell. For most left-wing people, bragging about their low-carbon lifestyle is just cope. It's just a way of rationalising away the fact that they could never afford a high-carbon lifestyle anyway. If you want to reduce carbon, it's the successful people you need to convince, like Andrew Tate. But this is the problem with Greta. She's taken a partisan stance on loads of divisive issues. She supports trans rights. I mean, if you're worried about snowflakes melting, why would you get involved with the gender ideology movement? It's hardly an environmentally friendly movement either. Huge amounts of carbon are consumed to develop new and exciting pronouns for consumption by today's gender goblin youth, and to update the pride flag, which now has to be replaced every 4.5 seconds as a new chevron is added to represent Palestinian neurodivergent they-thembians of colour or whatever. And by 2050, experts say that 90% of Western landfill will be fake genitalia from detransitioning pronoun people. Probably. There are plenty of people on the left who are gender realists and will be alienated by Greta's stance on this. If you want the maximum number of people to be on board with climate change, why alienate half of them by taking an extreme stance on an issue like this? And some of the issues she supports directly contradict the climate movement, like her support for mass immigration. Her boat even picked up 4 Libyan refugees. I mean, let's hope they do better in Europe than the Libyan refugees who blew up little kids at an Ariana Grande concert. And it's not just explosive devices that release emissions. When someone moves from the third world to the UK, their carbon footprint increases by an insane amount as they start living a Western lifestyle instead of living in a mud hut. The average annual carbon footprint per person in the Congo is 0.03 tonnes. It's about a carrier bag's worth. Whereas in the UK, it's around 11.7 tonnes. So someone in the UK causes more than 400 times more carbon emissions than someone in the Congo. Mass immigration to the UK was responsible for the release of an extra 25 million tonnes of carbon just in the last 5 years. That's 7% of our emissions. These are huge numbers. If Greta actually wanted to reduce carbon emissions, the first thing she'd demand is an immediate stop to mass immigration from the third world. But she supports it. She wants people to come from the Congo to Europe and burn vastly more carbon. So we know that she doesn't actually care about climate change. And she protested against the use of indigenous land for wind turbines in Europe, even though all land is someone's, and indigenous people shouldn't get special treatment just because they poo in a hole. So what's more important to Greta, indigenous rights or saving the planet? Surely indigenous people can make some sacrifices for green energy as well as us. And what about the indigenous rights of indigenous Europeans to not be overrun by people who are indigenous to the Horn of Africa? But most controversial is Greta's stance on Gaza. In the wake of the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel, when Islamists slaughtered and raped 1,200 Israelis, Greta was filmed chanting, "Long live Palestine, crush Zionism." Zionism is the belief that Jews constitute a nation and have a historic right for self-determination on the land that's currently Israel. I'm intrigued by this concept and look forward to it being applied to British people. But basically, what Zionism is the right of Israel to exist. If Israel didn't exist and the Jews had to assimilate amongst the Arabs, history shows us that the Jews would be wiped out. Greta was arrested in Malmo during pro-Palestinian protests tied to the Eurovision Song Contest, condemning Israel's participation. She started wearing a terrorist tea towel for her speeches.
Fuck Turkey. And fuck Israel.
She claims that Germany is behind the genocide in Gaza, which is unlikely because if Germany was involved, there would actually be one. Even the United Nations, who would love for there to be a genocide to get offended about, have had to admit that there's no genocide. And Greta didn't condemn Hamas, even though they slaughter Palestinians. Maybe the Islamists promised to switch to a renewable propellant when they burn women in cages, and their sustainable executions of homosexuals that use gravity. I think that makes the homicidal homophobes of Hamas eligible for US aid funding. They're in such harmony with Mother Earth. Greta's one-sided stance on Gaza alienated people from her and led to a split in the climate movement, with Germany's Luisa Neubauer distancing herself. Blimey, it's not just the climate that's getting warmer, the climate activists are getting hotter as well. One climate activist was so furious at Greta hijacking a climate event to talk about Gaza that he tried to wrestle the mic off her.
But we have not been listening. The people in power have not been listening.
I come here for a climate demonstration, not a political view.
And there are lots of humanitarian disasters around the world. Yemen, Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria, the Congo. I wonder what it is about the Gaza conflict specifically that gets under Greta's skin. Well, she was awarded Anti-Semite of the Week, which must have caused some fury in the anti-Semitic community. You've got people there putting in the hard work week in, week out to be genuinely anti-Semitic, and then this kid comes along and steals your thunder. They must feel the same way about her as a seasoned climate scientist does. And she joined the Freedom Flotilla to Gaza, even though it looked like a gap year to me. Why does nobody care about the human rights of people in cold places? It's always the Mediterranean in June, not Yakutsk in November. This is Greta's crewmate, Thiago Avila. He was filmed punching the air during a meeting in Beirut where attendees chanted, "Death to Israel, death to America, victory for Islam." The flotilla styled itself as a protest against Israel's naval blockade of Gaza, but the UN itself has found that under international law, the blockade, which is designed to stop Hamas from smuggling rockets and other weapons, is entirely legal. As Flotilla The Hun got closer to Gaza, I thought Israel might say it discovered Hamas tunnels under the boat and blow them out of the water, but they didn't. They just stormed the boat, and Greta missed a chance to do a top prank of painting her life vest black and having some headphone wires poking out of it. What about the aid the boat was carrying? Well, it was described as a symbolic amount of aid to Gaza. I mean, if you're starving, wouldn't you want some actual aid rather than symbolic aid? And Israel is delivering more meals to Gaza than anyone. They hand out more than 500,000 meals a day to feed civilians in Gaza. I'm sure Greta will thank them any moment now. And unlike Hamas, they don't siphon aid off to make themselves rich. Have you ever wondered how Hamas top brass became billionaires? Here's some footage of Israel handing out aid to desperate Islamists. So Greta and her buddies were deported. Keir Starmer should phone Netanyahu and ask what his secret is for deporting people who arrive on small boats. When Greta arrived in Paris, she denounced Israel as kidnapping her.
We have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible. People were not being treated well. I was not able to say goodbye to people, and I don't know what's happening. And there were many issues.
When you say they're not treated well, what do you mean?
Well,
could you elaborate for us?
Obviously, in a very dehumanizing way. But of course, I have to stress nothing compared to what Palestinians are going through.
But still, can you give us some, what happened to you when you arrived in Ashdod port? I mean, were you taken off the boat? Was there any violence? Were you detained? How? Where?
No, I prefer not to go into details about that. We arrived there, we were detained, and then we were, yeah.
I don't know if you know, but
She was given the option to watch footage of the October 7th attacks on Israel, but declined. Her colleagues said it was psychological torture. It's all a bit ironic considering she's barely mentioned the Israeli civilians who actually were kidnapped and tortured for real on October the 7th. Honestly, Israel should have just let her land in Gaza and then sunk her boat and left her there. And Greta had a bit of an easier time than the women who were kidnapped by Hamas. Her kidnappers managed to resist raping her, and instead of keeping her captive for 2 years like Hamas did with their hostages, they sent her home as soon as they could. Top tip, if you're ever kidnapped and you want to get home quickly, try being as annoying as Greta Thunberg. Look at all those plastic flags made from fossil fuels. Trump had some choice words for her.
Mr. President, do you have a message for Greta Thunberg, and did she come up on your call with the Prime Minister today?
Well, she's a strange person. She's a young, angry person. I don't know if it's real anger. It's hard to believe, actually, but I saw what happened. She's certainly different. Anger management. I think she has to go to an anger management class. That's my primary recommendation for her.
Kidnapped by Israel, as she says? Was she kidnapped?
I find it. I think Israel has enough problems without kidnapping Greta Thunberg.
And secondly, are you going to
Is that what she said? She was kidnapped by Israel?
Yes, sir.
Greta says she won't stop speaking out about Gaza's suffering. There's no climate justice without human rights, but for all her apparent concern about human suffering, the Green Lobby condemns millions of people to poverty and death through higher energy costs. In April 2019, addressing the UK Parliament, Greta said, "We are speaking of lowering instead of stopping emissions, but stopping emissions completely would cause huge suffering. The modern Western lifestyles we take for granted are pretty much directly thanks to the exploitation of fossil fuels. Look how life expectancy has risen from 30 years to 70 years. When prices rise to subsidise green energy or because fossil fuel use is restricted, people can't afford to use energy to heat their homes or run air conditioning, and then hundreds of thousands of people die from the heat or from the cold, and the cost of everything rises, forcing more people into poverty. And by restricting fossil fuel exploration in Europe, the Green Lobby left Europe dependent on Russia for oil and gas, giving Putin the money and leverage to invade Ukraine. And high energy prices absolutely tanked European economies. Look how German industrial production has tanked over the last few years. Stuff is still being manufactured, by the way, it's just the manufacturing has moved to China, where they're still opening coal-fired power stations. And will climate change even be that bad for the West? Scotland is made out of mountains. If it gets warmer and the sea levels rise, we just move up the mountain and open a vineyard instead of growing turnips. Making a country out of mountains was a smart move. Scotland saw this coming. Ooh, but it'll be bad for places like Bangladesh. Listen, I told you I'm already not worried about climate change. You can stop selling it to me. And Greta seems to stop her lecturing when someone gives her an opportunity for attention, such as when she appeared on the cover of British Vogue and on the cover of Vogue Scandinavia, and accepted the Glamour Woman of the Year award without decrying the fashion industry for perpetuating a culture of disposable consumerism and environmental degradation. And she's praised for her low-carbon lifestyle. Unlike other climate activists, she doesn't fly into climate conferences on a private jet. She sailed across the Atlantic in 2019 and not on a huge private yacht like Emma Thompson did. Eat your gruel, peasants. Give up your cars and your steaks. You must save the planet so that I may travel by yacht. But how low-carbon was Greta's yacht trip? Crew members flew to New York to operate the yacht, and Greta said, "Hey, that's no biggie, we're going to offset the emissions from the flight." But carbon offsetting is a scam. Analysis by The Guardian found that 94% of carbon offsetting schemes are just a rip-off. They're not selling carbon offsetting, they're selling a feeling of smugness to rich people who want to help the environment but also don't want to change their lifestyle. Basically, if you use carbon, you use carbon. You can't unuse it by giving money to some shyster. It's another thing that's just for show and for feelings. Greta's background has raised suspicions as well. Thunberg was born into a showbiz family. Her dad's an actor, her mother is a singer who represented Sweden in the 2009 Eurovision Song Contest, finishing 21st, and while she failed at superstardom the first time round, she now seems to be living vicariously through her daughter, launching a book off the back of her. Greta's other sisters have ended up in what we could politely refer to as show business. Here's her sister Beata performing at a Pride event. And she's been lauded with establishment awards, getting the cover of Time magazine, just like Hitler, and bagging a nomination for Nobel Peace Prize. It might seem strange to see someone who wants Israel to be eliminated get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize until you see who actually won that year. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who has been accused of human rights abuses, mass rape, extrajudicial killing, and the use of starvation as a weapon. When's Greta sailing Flotilla The Hun to Ethiopia with a packet of jammy Dodgers? And there are suspicions that Greta is a manufactured shill. Despite her image of fighting against the establishment, she's supported by it at every turn. In 2023, German police arrested Greta during a protest against a coal mine expansion in Lützerath. Authorities have denied this, but it looks like a cozy photo opportunity to me. Have a look yourself.
You also want those for you, man?
Wie sieht's denn aus mit der Badstraße?
Was mit der?
and my suspicions aren't quelled by the fact that Thunberg was released and no charges were filed. Is Greta a pawn of the establishment? Well, it would explain why she's been arrested loads of times in Sweden, in Germany, in Britain, the Netherlands, and most recently Israel, and is still able to get visas and permission to travel. Green energy is a huge trillion-dollar industry and probably the most powerful political lobby in the world right now because it's so closely intertwined with governments, with subsidies, tax breaks and regulations. The EU set aside €1 trillion for net zero. Anytime you get that kind of money sloshing around, you get corruption and influence, and some of this is plainly visible, with green energy tycoons donating millions to left-wing politicians who then reward them with huge donations of taxpayers' money and by destroying their competitors' businesses, all paid for by the taxpayer as a net zero subsidy. The green energy industry is more like a mafia than a happy clappy bunch of hippies, and their main goal is to make everyone scared to use their competitor's product. Fossil fuels. The Guardian announced it would use the term climate crisis instead of climate change in its articles, and global heating instead of global warming. The messaging is worked out very carefully, right down to hairdressers being trained to speak to customers about climate change. It's all designed to look authentic. Have they picked Greta as their figurehead to make it look like people are demanding their taxes are being given to these energy barons who fund them? So Greta doesn't actually care about the environment or people and takes a divisive stance on issues that have nothing to do with the climate change. What does she actually stand for? It's communism. In 2022, she said the goal was to overthrow the whole capitalist system. Communists hate Israel because it's Western. She's already echoing the language of communists when she threatened to put world leaders against the wall. This happens a lot under communism as people are executed by the state, although I guess it's a bit less threatening coming from a 7-stone vegan. Look how aggressively she targets Western nations, which have already made significant environmental improvements, compared to her muted criticism of major polluters like China, whose carbon footprint dwarfs European nations. Look how the climate protesters want to erase Israel, a Western nation, and replace it with a medieval Islamist hellhole. It was never about climate for any of them. Look how their Teslas went to landfill as soon as Elon Musk came out as based. The Teslas didn't start emitting carbon dioxide. This is purely political. If this was really about climate change, we might expect pragmatic solutions focused on innovation, private sector partnerships, and technological advancements, such as Musk delivers. Instead, we witness relentless calls for expanded governmental authority, reduced personal autonomy, and the destruction of capitalism. Greta Thunberg and the establishment that supports her promote solutions that invariably involve collectivist control, wealth redistribution, heavy government intervention, and severe restrictions on personal freedoms. They want communism. Climate change is just a sales tool. All the issues that Greta supports, they all contradict each other. Environmentalism, the annihilation of Israel, trans rights, indigenous rights, mass immigration, solidarity with Islamists. None of it makes sense until you realise she supports them because they can be used as a battering ram against Western civilization. The good news is Greta's probably going to change her mind when she grows up. Even Holly Valance Sheet once wore a t-shirt with a hammer and sickle on it. Everyone's young and stupid once. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you want to support me making these videos, you can sign up to my Patreon and join a growing community of the only sane people left in the West and get early access and no ads. And don't forget to take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code KEARSE, that's KEARSE, at the link below and get 60% of an annual plan. That's incogni.com/Kearse. Okay, thanks for listening. I've been Leo Kearse. Bye. Bye bye.